Welcome back to the Deep Dive, where we take complex, cutting-edge source material and turn that foundational knowledge into insights that really stick. You've definitely heard the chatter, you've seen the headlines, but today we are zeroing in on a period of technological acceleration that it redefines rapid. We're looking at a hyper-specific, blindingly fast period of time, the 8 weeks spanning late 2025 into early 2026. This was the exact window when the entire artificial intelligence industry was, well, fundamentally rewritten by a breakthrough called AI scaffolding from this company, Poetiq. So our mission today is pretty straightforward, but I think it's crucial. We're not just, chronicling history. We are analyzing the shockwave. We need to understand how a technology went from a leaked internal demo to global mandated infrastructure, complete with government oversight in just 2 months. This is a timeline of institutional adoption, cultural shift, and, well, open source warfare that happened faster than most major corporations can even finalize their annual budgets.
Before we jump into the timeline, let's make sure we're all on the same page with this core concept of AI scaffolding. Our source material describes it beautifully and I think really accessibly. It calls it neural Velcro. So it's not complex deep learning code itself. It's more of a modular, self-adapting architecture that layers onto existing large language models, the LLMs. Imagine you have this massive, incredibly powerful engine, the LLM, but it's frigid and, it's slow to reconfigure. The scaffolding is the system that lets you instantly snap new functionalities, new constraints, new logic onto that engine without having to rebuild the engine itself. It's what lets these massive models suddenly become flexible, adaptive, and critically incredibly fast to train. And that flexibility, that's the core engine of our 8-week revolution here. The sources we've shared trace the exact day-by-day moment this went from an internal experimental project to a mandatory global infrastructure. Okay, let's unpack this. Before the leak, what was the established problem in the AI world that this scaffolding actually solved?
And why did it trigger such an immediate, almost frantic reaction from the development community?
Well, what's crucial to understand is that the problem was structural. It was deep. Large language models, for all their power, are essentially monolithic, and they're highly brittle. If you want them to adopt a new behavior, you often have to retrain the entire model, which, it costs tens of millions of dollars and takes weeks or even months. Poetiq's scaffolding didn't just tweak performance, it offered a foundational and architectural fix to that rigidity. The speed of adoption wasn't just enthusiasm, it was a desperate realization that the industry had found its missing link. Our sources have this quote. It circulated everywhere during week 2 from a researcher who is, universally regarded as the industry's intellectual heavyweight, a real Jan LeCun equivalent. He called Poetiq's framework the missing middleware for scalable intelligence. And that label, it just stuck. It perfectly captured the need. And the data immediately backed up that powerful claim. The initial benefits that were highlighted in that internal demo were frankly staggering, and they immediately addressed the 2 biggest pain points in AI development. First, the scaffolding framework could slash typical LLM training times by an incredible 40%. Just think about the economic implications of that. You're instantly saving massive GPU compute costs and accelerating R&D cycles by nearly half. Second, and this is maybe more indicative of the future, it dramatically boosted coherence in complex multi-agent systems. We're moving past single chatbots to entire ecosystems of cooperating AIs, and before scaffolding, those systems would just pretend. They'd invariably lose context or contradict each other. That combination of speed and complexity management is precisely what turned the next 8 weeks into an absolute frenzy.
And the timeline kicks off with this wonderful moment of industry irony. We start in week 1, December 7th, 2025. You have all the industry giants, the established players like xAI and OpenAI at a major high-profile AI scaffolding conference. And they're talking about the future, talking about how this architecture might one day be built.
Exactly. They were discussing the theoretical promise. And while they were all debating the white papers, Poetiq just dropped the working open-sourced prototype. The moment of ignition wasn't an official press release or some keynote speech. It was a leaked internal demo video that just went viral on X. That platform became the primary vector for the technology going public. It instantly bypassed traditional media, analyst reviews, and went straight to the developers.
They didn't even have time to craft a narrative, which in a way I think added to the authenticity and the urgency of it all. It was a purely meritocratic validation, and that developer reaction was instantaneous.
Oh, it was a quantitative fever pitch. The sources tracked this minute by minute. In the first 48 hours after that leak, the open-sourced beta on GitHub clocked 50,000 downloads. Now stop and think about that number for a second. This isn't people just clicking a link. This is 50,000 professional developers globally, all at once, deciding that this leaked, unvetted code was so fundamentally important, so promising, that it was worth their time immediately to download it, fork it, and start building on it. It just speaks volumes about how desperately the industry needed this solution.
And that collective validation, it fueled a massive surge in community action. It wasn't just downloading code, people were organizing around it. Where was that immediate intellectual energy focused?
It was everywhere, and it was intense. You had these deep theoretical academic threads happening on Reddit's Our Machine Learning, trying to dissect the novel architecture. At the same time, you had the highly practical implementation debates on Hacker News. But I find it incredibly insightful that one of the first major community conversations, even before performance optimization, was centered around the implications for AGI safety. That signals that developers knew right away this wasn't just some fast library. This was a potential building block for genuinely complex emergent intelligence, and it forced them to confront the profound ethical implications right out of the gate.
And that urgency, it manifested in tangible work. It wasn't just passive discussion boards.
No, not at all. This was rapid engineering. A dedicated coalition of 200 developers immediately formed a high-priority Slack channel with a singular purpose: crowdsource integrations. They knew the new engine was hot, but it needed to speak the language of the existing infrastructure. Their goal was to rapidly build universal adapters, specifically for the core established machine learning frameworks like PyTorch and TensorFlow, to ensure that the scaffolding could be dropped into any existing research or commercial project, instantly. That move really cemented the framework's accessibility and made sure it wasn't confined to a niche.
The mood during that first week must have been absolutely electric, a true sense of technological discovery, a shared purpose. But even amid that optimism, there was the inherent FUD, right? The fear, uncertainty, and doubt about corporate power moving in.
Oh, that tension is classic open source dynamics. The sources mention immediate generalized concern about potential IP grabs and co-option from the deep-pocketed incumbents, and they name Google specifically. This is the existential dilemma for every revolutionary open source project. How do you maintain that decentralized spirit of innovation when multi-trillion-dollar corporations recognize its value and might try to acquire it or, replicate it?
That tension, though, it became a defining feature of the entire 8-week timeline. But the raw momentum of the open source community in week 1 was just enough to guarantee its survival and widespread deployment, which naturally brings us into week 2, December 14th. And this is the week where the initial gut feeling of the developer community gets officially validated by the industry's intellectual aristocracy.
Yes. The community's belief shifted from promising new tool to verified industry standard virtually overnight. That prominent AI researcher we mentioned earlier, he didn't just offer a passing comment. He tweeted a detailed, multi-part thread praising Poetiq's work. That endorsement, calling it the missing middleware for scalable intelligence, was the final stamp of approval. It meant that every VC, every CTO, and every skeptical academic now had to take the technology seriously.
And the metrics just soared. Downloads surged from that initial 50,000 to a massive 200,000 in just 7 days. But I want to spend time on the practical implications here, because more important than the download count were the actual commercial and practical integrations that started to appear.
The utility was immediately translating into infrastructure. Hugging Face, which serves as the central hub and repository for much of the world's accessible pre-trained models, announced they were integrating a Poetiq-compatible transformer layer. This was massive. It meant that the entire existing universe of openly available LLMs could suddenly and effortlessly leverage the performance and coherence benefits of the scaffolding. And beyond the core infrastructure players, you had the innovative startups demonstrating the new possibilities. The sources point to a company called Neuroweave, which released a plugin specifically engineered for real-time scaffolding in edge AI devices. This is where the narrative moves beyond the data center. The technology wasn't just for massive server farms, it was being moved onto drones, into autonomous vehicles, and eventually onto consumer devices like high-end smartphones. This immediate portability suggested universality.
The application that really makes this abstract concept concrete for the listener, though, is the San Francisco Hackathon prototype that emerged that week. They use scaffolded AI and autonomous drones specifically designed to adapt to ethical dilemmas on the fly. Let's talk about the implications of that shift. We're talking about giving machines flexible moral reasoning, not just rigid pre-programmed logic.
This is the essence of emergent intelligence, and it's a direct consequence of the scaffolding architecture. In a traditional system, a drone's decision tree would be rigid. If condition X, do Y. But in a complex ethical dilemma, say, prioritizing safety between two equally necessary but conflicting tasks, the old system fails. The scaffolding allows the LLM to instantly layer new behavioral patterns, contextually relevant rules, and external data sources without needing a full retrain. The scaffold handles the rapid, context-aware adaptation needed for novel ethical choices. It is a huge paradigm-shifting leap from reactive systems to truly adaptive, context-aware ones.
But, as we know, every hyper-rapid scaling story has a wobble, a moment where the system breaks under its own weight. And in week 2, we hit the first glitch.
We did. The sources meticulously detail a minor bug in the open source beta that caused what developers termed hallucination cascades in about 5% of test runs. And while 5% might sound minor, in the context of high-stakes AI applications like the Neuroweave edge devices or the autonomous drones, a cascade failure is a very high-stakes issue.
Right, and let's clarify what a hallucination cascade actually means in this context.
Sure. In a monolithic LLM, a hallucination is usually a self-contained error. The model outputs something nonsensical. But in a scaffolded multi-agent system, the initial error, the hallucination, is instantly propagated and amplified by the subsequent layers of the scaffold. So layer A produces bad data. Layer B uses that bad data as context to form a catastrophic conclusion, and Layer C executes a wildly incorrect command based on that conclusion. The error doesn't stop, it multiplies, hence the cascade. And this sparked heated discussion on GitHub issues about stability and predictability. This was the moment the community tested Poetiq's operational resilience and transparency.
And Poetiq handled it with textbook transparency and incredible speed, which arguably saved the project's reputation. They dropped a hotfix immediately, resolving the bug within 12 hours of it being widely reported, and then, crucially, they held a live AMA and Ask Me Anything that drew an audience of 10,000 viewers.
That decision to be immediately public, high visibility, and transparent, especially when the technology was still so fragile, was a masterstroke in community management. They didn't sweep the problem under the rug or issue some vague statement. They addressed the mechanics of the cascade failure directly, which was key to maintaining the trust needed for that rapid growth.
And even as the bug was being fixed, the financial signals were escalating. We start hearing serious whispers, not just speculation, but solid indications of a significant $50 million seed round beginning to circulate.
Yeah.
This indicated that the VC community had already recognized this technology not as a passing fad, but as foundational infrastructure with, unicorn potential.
What's truly fascinating here is how fast the technical community validated and started building on the framework despite the bug. The promise of the technology, that incredible 40% faster training time, and the promise of coherent multi-agent systems, it just outweighed the inherent risks of that initial instability. Developers were willing to work through the teething problems because the payoff was so fundamentally high, it just confirmed the urgency that they all felt globally.
So as we transition into week 3, December 21st, the calendar suggests the world should be slowing down for the holiday season. But the AI world is operating on a completely different clock. This is the week that technology moves out of the purely open-source enthusiast ecosystem and into institutional adoption, giving it permanent legitimacy.
That acceleration is it's unprecedented. Despite the traditional academic slowdown around Christmas, the world's leading institutions, MIT and Stanford, immediately announced Poetiq scaffolding as a core mandatory module for their upcoming winter AI courses. And this caused enrollment spikes of over 300%. This is a massive, immediate signal that the academic world recognized this framework not as some temporary trend to be studied later, but as the new required foundational knowledge for any serious AI practitioner. It was essential for the next generation of researchers.
And big tech followed suit, providing that crucial market validation. Meta, which had already invested heavily in the open source ecosystem, openly announced they were utilizing and open sourcing a Poetiq-credited variant specifically for their llama models.
That meta move was so critical. By crediting Poetiq and adopting the architecture, they were essentially acknowledging that Poetiq had solved a problem faster and better than their own internal teams. And they were integrating it into arguably the most popular open-source LLM family in the world. And simultaneously, Microsoft Azure, the cloud infrastructure giant, integrated it into their toolkit, which accelerated enterprise pilots globally.
And the source material highlights one specific area where this integration was immediately transformative: healthcare diagnostics.
Right. Scaffolding's innate ability to handle complex, chained tasks with guaranteed coherence made it ideal for synthesizing multiple disparate data streams. We're talking interpreting medical imagery, cross-referencing patient history, synthesizing genomic data, and flagging risk factors, all in one coherent workflow. This is a critical application where reliability and adaptability are paramount, and big tech needed the scaffolding to reliably bridge those data silos.
This rapid, massive mainstreaming, however, brought the core ethical debates to a head. The community began to polarize into two very distinct camps. The pro-scaffolding evangelists, who saw it as the inevitable fast track to beneficial AGI, and the deep skeptics.
And the skepticism was well-founded. It focused on technical safety. Their primary warning was about black box brittleness in complex scaffolds. When you layer emergent behaviors rapidly, as scaffolding allows you to do, debugging those complex layered interactions or ensuring predictable outcomes becomes exponentially more difficult. If a cascading failure occurs, tracing the source of the error becomes a near impossible task. The complexity is the risk. They feared creating intelligent systems whose inner workings were effectively impenetrable.
And naturally, in late 2025, any major tech debate instantly hits X and gets globally amplified. Elon Musk jumped into the fray, ensuring the debate was global and mainstream, with a viral retweet comparing scaffolding to AI's exoskeleton, adding that caution, build it right or it crumbles under the weight of its own emergent complexity. That tweet alone racked up 2 million impressions, dramatically raising the visibility of those safety concerns.
But Poetiq demonstrated significant foresight here. Recognizing that regulatory scrutiny was inevitable and needed to be addressed immediately, they hosted a critical ethics roundtable webinar. And crucially, they actively invited their most vocal critics to participate. This move trended worldwide, and most importantly, it attracted official UN AI advisors. This showed a deep commitment to proactive safety and early engagement with regulation, signaling corporate maturity barely 3 weeks after the initial leak.
The final, silent proof of its academic impact comes at the end of week 3, right around Christmas, when the framework citation count in RCEIV papers tripled. It went from a leaked demo to the subject of serious, verifiable scientific inquiry in less than 20 days. I mean, has any foundational technology ever moved that fast through the research pipeline?
It's really hard to find a parallel. The speed at which it became a mandatory reference point for ongoing research is a testament to how profoundly it shifted the baseline of what was technically possible. Researchers didn't just adopt it, they immediately had to rewrite their methodology around it.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. Week 4, spanning the new year. This is the moment the theoretical scaffolding became visible, tangible, engaging consumer technology.
This marks the true arrival of the scaffold native application. The sources detail the launch of the first app built specifically around the scaffolding's core capabilities, a collaborative storytelling tool. The genius lay in its architecture. It used multiple distinct AI agents co-building narratives in real time, adapting to user input without needing any of the traditional laborious prompt engineering that defined previous LM apps.
So the scaffold layers manage the complex, asynchronous back and forth automatically, allowing the agents to maintain consistent character voices and narrative arcs over hours of interaction. That collaborative storytelling tool immediately got massive attention. It debuted at CES previews and went spectacularly viral on TikTok, with users creating these incredibly complex, emergent epics they could never have scripted themselves.
And this was the key. It showed that the tech wasn't just for highly technical developers. It was immediately accessible, compelling, and creatively empowering for a massive consumer audience. It demonstrated an immediate commercial appeal far beyond typical enterprise AI tools.
And in the B2B world, the impact was equally dramatic and concrete. Robotics developers were reporting 60% faster prototyping times for complex simulations using Poetiq's adaptive layers. If you can rapidly prototype and iterate complex robotic behaviors, things like grasping unfamiliar objects or navigating unexpected terrain, you accelerate the entire timeline for everything from highly automated manufacturing to deep-sea exploration robots. The cost and time reduction here translates directly into market dominance.
And of course, the money finally solidified this reality. Poetiq officially closed that long-whispered $50 million seed round, led by A16Z, arguably the most influential venture capital firm in the infrastructure world. This wasn't just funding, it was institutional validation of Poetiq's unicorn potential and its role as the next critical infrastructure layer, positioning them for explosive future growth.
But week 4 also brought the first major geopolitical drama, confirming the strategic importance of the infrastructure.
Indeed. The drama escalated quickly. The The source material notes that a major Chinese firm released a forked version of the open source scaffolding, but it contained, quote, military-grade tweaks, immediately raising alarm bells globally. This action immediately ignited geopolitical tensions, pushing for urgent export control talks in Washington, D.C. The core takeaway here is that foundational AI infrastructure is inherently dual use. The moment it accelerates commercial development, it simultaneously becomes a critical matter of national security and technological rivalry.
That geopolitical tension, however, was immediately countered by a positive, proactive movement from the global open source community, the Scaffold for Good initiative.
It was a beautiful response, really reinforcing the democratic potential of open source. They started rapidly developing and open sourcing humanitarian applications, specifically mentioning sophisticated, multi-agent disaster response planners. These planners use the scaffolding to coordinate relief efforts, logistical needs, and real-time situational awareness much faster than any centralized system could. This reinforced the idea that foundational technology can and should be democratized for societal benefit, even as governments struggle to regulate its strategic importance.
The cultural zenith for this 4-week sprint came right as January began. The hashtag Poetiq Scaffolding hit 1 billion views. That level of viral global saturation marks the definitive shift from a niche technical breakthrough to a foundational mainstream cultural phenomenon that everyone, from developers to consumers, was discussing. All right, jumping into week 5, January 4th. The sheer velocity of growth, while exhilarating, starts to introduce predictable but pretty serious scaling problems. The GitHub repository hits the coveted 1 million stars, a massive validation milestone that very few projects ever reach. But the infrastructure itself starts to struggle under the weight of its own success.
Yeah, scaling an open source project that is now foundational to global AI is an immense logistical challenge. The servers overloaded routinely during peak contribution hours, particularly in different global time zones, leading to a brief but notable outage. The community, always quick with relevant humor, immediately memed this incident as the scaffold collapse, a collective moment of course, the infrastructure for the most advanced intelligence layer just crashed.
That outage forced Poetiq to make an incredibly innovative move regarding governance, a move that fundamentally altered the future of open source infrastructure management. They didn't centralize control. They leaned into decentralization, establishing a DAO-like governance model.
This was revolutionary. Instead of a traditional closed corporate board dictating the roadmap, this DAO-like model allowed the top, most trusted, and most active contributors in the community to vote on roadmap priorities via snapshot. This system, decentralized control, distributing the massive burden of maintenance and strategic direction across the global user base. It was a clear signal to the community that Poetiq wasn't interested in a corporate takeover of a fundamentally open-source system, which maintained loyalty and distributed risk.
It effectively inoculated them against those IP grab fears that circulated back in week 1, ensuring that the scaffolding remained a community asset, not a private one. Meanwhile, the integrations were reaching higher levels of enterprise secrecy and ambition.
Right. Insider leaks, highly credible ones, suggested that Apple's long-rumored, highly anticipated Siri overhaul was incorporating scaffolding. And they weren't just using it for speed. The application was highly specific, creating more empathetic, contextually rich, and human-like responses. This confirmed that scaffolding was moving beyond sheer computational efficiency and into the complex realm of nuanced human-machine interaction, an area where LLMs had historically struggled with consistency.
And while all that speculation was happening, the hard, peer-reviewed science began to arrive, directly addressing the safety concerns from week 3. Academic papers began flooding the submission channels for major conferences like NeuriPS, with one providing crucial quantitative validation. Poetiq scaffolding architecture reduces bias amplification by a significant 25% in chained models.
That finding was a massive counterargument to the black box brittleness concerns. It provided quantitative proof that the scaffolding wasn't just fast, it was inherently more robust and, crucially, fairer in its operation than traditional monolithic LLM setups. Because the scaffolding layers could be audited individually and constrained with specific ethical parameters, the system could prevent minor biases from compounding into catastrophic prejudiced outcomes.
And this technical superiority naturally fueled the business side. Poetiq's valuation whispers climbed firmly to unicorn status over $1 billion in just 5 weeks. This valuation led to immediate, intense talent wars and targeted poaching campaigns from established labs, including Google's DeepMind. The infrastructure layer was now directly competing with the world's most established AI research institutions for top engineering talent. As we move into week 6, January 11th, the technology starts to jump silos in a really profound way. We are moving beyond the core AI and computer science world, seeing massive ripple effects across multiple previously disconnected industries.
Yes, if we connect this to the bigger picture. Week 6 is where scaffolding becomes a universal accelerator for scientific discovery. The most dramatic example cited in the source material is the unexpected rapid integration into bio-AI labs. Scaffolding was immediately repurposed to optimize complex protein folding simulations.
And what was the mechanism there? Why was scaffolding, which was designed for language models, suddenly revolutionizing molecular biology?
Protein folding is a staggeringly complex, combinatorial problem involving immense computational power. Traditional simulations are often sequential and rigid. Scaffolding's adaptive, modular layers allowed researchers to run multiple, semi-independent simulations testing constraints, chemical interactions, kinetic stability simultaneously and codependently. This massively parallel, coherent approach meant Pfizer announced a Poetiq-powered pipeline capable of shaving months off critical drug trials. This is the clearest definition of a life-changing technological application, moving from open-source software architecture to physical medicine in just a matter of weeks.
And on the completely opposite end of the cultural spectrum, the gaming revolution arrived. Unity plugins were released that enabled genuinely emergent non-player character, or NPC, behaviors.
This completely changed game development. No longer were NPCs limited to rigid, pre-scripted lines or simple state machines. The scaffolded NPCs could adapt their personalities, their motivations, their dialogue based on the real-time, nuanced context of the player's actions and the environment. The practical result was immediate commercial viability. An indie title using this technology sold 100,000 copies on Steam day one, marking a massive shift in creative possibilities for immersive, emergent narrative gaming.
And the innovation wasn't just top-down, driven by corporations or academics.
Yeah.
The global community became hyper-self-organizing, establishing physical, local scaffold hubs, these regional meetups spanning the globe, from Berlin to Bangalore.
These decentralized physical meetings fostered the absolute cutting edge of research outside of established institutions. It was here that highly speculative but potentially transformative ideas began to circulate, including the fascinating next-generation concept of scaffolded quantum error correction. They were already thinking 2 or 3 steps ahead, linking emergent AI to the next inevitable computing breakthrough: quantum systems.
And the legal landscape clarified dramatically this week in a huge victory for open-source principles. A high-profile lawsuit from a patent troll, a standard occurrence designed to shake down any successful open-source project, collapsed very quickly.
And the reason for the collapse was the community's collective defense. Developers, engineers, and academics all rallied, submitting numerous amicus briefs, friend-of-the-court arguments that collectively dismantle the troll's claim. This collective action boosted morale, validated the community's decentralized power, and more importantly, it set a crucial legal precedent for the robust defense of foundational open-source licenses against corporate legal threats.
The week concluded with maximum hype, confirming the public perception of the technology's trajectory. Elon Musk ran a poll on X, asking his massive following if scaffolding would accelerate AI development enough to lead to AGI by 2030. And 82% of respondents said yes. That's just an overwhelming display of public confidence, closely followed by the strategic teasing of Grok integrations as the next development. Okay, we hit week 7, January 18th. For the past 6 weeks, the narrative has been defined by speed, innovation, and community response. Now, governments finally catch up to the technological reality. The focus shifts irrevocably to regulation and global standards. The chaotic energy has to be channeled.
Right, and the initial reaction came from the world's leading regulatory bodies. The EU, already proactive with its AI Act, fast-tracked scaffolding transparency clauses. They mandated strict audits for any Poetiq-based systems deployed within the European Union. Concurrently, across the Atlantic, the U.S. National Institute of Standards and Technology, NIST, drafted a set of voluntary yet highly influential guidelines for secure and trustworthy scaffolding deployment. This marked the definitive shift from technological speculation to serious, necessary governance.
And this is where Poetiq's foresight from week 3 paid off massively. They had already engaged regulators, and now they complied immediately. They didn't just meet the EU mandate, they released a comprehensive audit toolkit.
This toolkit quickly became the de facto industry standard. Poetiq turned compliance into market leadership. The toolkit provided verifiable, granular visibility into those previously feared black box scaffolded layers, allowing external auditors to certify stability and compliance. They were ready for the regulatory wave before regulators even fully knew what questions to ask.
And developers leverage this transparency for massive societal benefit, proving the dual-use nature of compliance. A scaffolded misinformation detector went live on various major fact-check sites globally.
And the scaffolding proves uniquely capable here. Because of its inherent ability to coherently analyze complex multimodal inputs, cross-referencing video, audio, text, and contextual history all at once, it proved capable of catching over 90% more complex deepfakes than previous, more sequential detection systems. So transparency led directly to increased trust and utility in the high-stakes informational environment, reinforcing the idea that foundational infrastructure could protect democratic discourse.
The democratization focus, which had been a part of the open source ethos from the start, remained incredibly strong this week. Community bounties actively funded critical edge cases that big tech often overlooks, specifically focusing on creating scaffolding integrations for low-resource languages.
And this is a technically hard problem. Training sophisticated models for languages with very small data sets is computationally inefficient. But scaffolding allowed developers to adapt the architecture to these low-resource languages much faster by leveraging existing, larger models as the base layer and just snapping the adaptive small-footprint scaffolding on top. This was a dedicated, successful effort to ensure that the massive benefits of the AI revolution were accessible in the Global South, actively working to prevent the digital divide from widening further.
The public perception of Poetiq reached a visionary height when one of the company's co-founders gave a highly viewed TED Talk, racking up 5 million views. The message was clear and highly intentional.
Absolutely. The co-founder framed scaffolding as nothing less than AI's democratic infrastructure. This talk solidified the company's identity as a leader focused on accessibility and transparency, not just technological acceleration. It was a clear public statement that their goal was to provide the building blocks for an equitable, globally distributed AI future.
And finally, week 8, the end of January. 2 months exactly after that leaked video, the ecosystem achieves a remarkable level of maturity. Scaffolding is no longer the new, exciting thing. It's just foundational infrastructure. It's the air they breathe.
It's been thoroughly normalized. The sources aptly compare its ubiquity now to Kubernetes for containers, an essential, invisible infrastructure layer upon which all modern, scalable applications are built. The metrics of maturity are concrete. The ecosystem now boasts over 500 dedicated plugins, catering to everything from database management to specific niche scientific simulations, and a dedicated major conference, ScaffoldCon 26, is formally announced for the spring, indicating a permanent global industry structure has formed.
That collaboration piece, which was kind of missing in the competitive early weeks, also solidified. We see former rivals like Anthropic sharing specific safety benchmarks and testing methodologies for scaffolded systems.
That collaboration is absolutely key. It demonstrates that the inherent complexity of the technology demands a unified, industry-wide approach to safety, regardless of proprietary interests or corporate rivalry. They realize that securing the foundational layer benefits everyone, leading to a much more responsible, unified approach to AI scaling.
And the humanitarian breakthroughs continued right up to the deadline. A scaffolded multimodal AI achieved a staggering 95% accuracy in real-time sign language translation.
And this breakthrough was recognized by the World Health Organization. It just highlights the potential for this adaptive technology to solve profound, high-impact communication barriers that monolithic models struggled with. It shows the real-world application of speed and coherence when applied to critical human needs.
But maturity doesn't mean the challenges disappear. Even as the technology delivers these incredible outcomes, the long-term sustainability debate rages. Compute demands continue to rise exponentially, driven by the scaffolding's ability to run increasingly complex multi-agent systems.
This led to serious, intense discussions about energy efficiency. The industry recognized that if they couldn't optimize the compute consumption, the ethical and practical constraints of power usage would ultimately be the limiting factor on rapid AI scaling. Yet even facing these monumental challenges, the community vibe remained resilient.
They meet the challenges with humor, like the persistent memes about scaffolding your coffee order, which became a shorthand for finding a surprisingly complex solution to a simple problem. This cultural resilience, this ability to laugh and organize at the same time, is often what sustains a rapidly evolving, decentralized ecosystem.
And as the calendar flips to February, attention pivots instantly to the next horizon. The sources finish with the whisper turning into a focused research discussion. Poetiq 2.0 and the imperative development of quantum-ready scaffolds. Hashtag outro outro.
So we just analyzed a timeline that saw a leaked demo video turn into foundational global infrastructure, complete with mandatory government audits, multi-billion-dollar valuations, and humanitarian impact all in 8 weeks. The pace is, to put it mildly, breathtaking. So what does this all mean?
Well, the 8 weeks from December 2025 to January 2026 wasn't just a technological acceleration. It was a fundamental shift in how we approach technology governance and industry structure. It showed definitively that foundational technology can dictate its own governance structures, the creation of that DAO-like model for community control. And it permanently broke down silo walls between disciplines. Bio-AI labs, gaming developers, geopolitical regulators, and academic researchers were all operating on the same timeline, driven by the adoption of the same core infrastructure layer. The speed of innovation now far outpaces traditional regulatory or business cycles.
And Poetiq's immediate compliance, their proactive transparency, and their willingness to decentralize control were what allowed them to survive that initial shockwave and become the globally accepted standard. They didn't just build a better framework, they built a better way to govern a framework.
The primary takeaway for you, the listener, is the understanding that infrastructure now moves at the speed of virality. A single open source leak can rewrite multi-billion-dollar industries overnight.
And looking ahead, the source material leaves us on the ultimate cliffhanger, the imperative of Poetiq 2.0 and the development of quantum-ready scaffolds. We've established that the modular, self-adapting nature of scaffolding created emergent intelligence and compressed the timeline for global adoption into just 2 months using classical computing architecture.
That raises a final crucial question for you to mull over as you process this revolution. If a framework designed for rapid, emergent intelligent scaffolding was capable of triggering a full-scale global institutional transformation in 8 weeks using today's hardware, what happens when that framework meets the exponential, near-instantaneous processing power of quantum computing? Does the timeline for foundational change compress from 8 weeks into 8 days? The history we just covered is really just the prologue to a future we are still struggling to grasp.